Good morning, Michael, and welcome. And good
Thank you
morning
very
to our
much.
listeners. Hey, good morning to our listeners, and welcome to our next coffee, Candid Coffee. And today we have Candid Coffee with Michael Ehlert. And I'm very excited to have Michael on the podcast with us today. I've known Michael now for a few months. And I must share with all the listeners that when I first met Michael, I was taken aback. I thought to myself, wow, such an impressive person, because Michael represents everything I want to be at times. Michael is independent, he's driven, he's ambitious. And I think to myself, I thought to myself when I first met Michael, wow, this is somebody I wish I had known about much earlier in my career. But I'm so glad that I know Michael now and I can learn so much from him. So, Michael, welcome, and welcome to Candid Coffee today.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to our conversation.
So listeners, let me share with you a little bit about Michael so we can get to know him a little bit. So, three words really sort of highlight who Michael is: knowledge, innovation, and drive. And how does that come through? Michael's been around for more than 30 years in the financial services industry, but starting from in banking, and has really had a transformative journey over this 30 years. Not only has Michael actually started businesses, but he's now evolved to start to acquire businesses as well. And by doing that, has really transformed his own landscape and the landscape around him, and helped other entrepreneurs to really bring out their own best selves in the work that they do. So, Michael, we're very excited to have you with us today. Excited to learn about your journey and learn about what your journey has meant in terms of board service as well. So, as we kick this off, Michael, I'd love for you to share with us some highlights of your journey. Specifically, what are you most proud of when you reflect over your 30 years of your career?
I think you mentioned these three words: drive, knowledge, and innovation. And I think the drive part is probably the biggest. I say prouder, but what stands out to me, and I see this in all situations wherever I come across, whether I'm in a third world country, whether I'm in a first world country, whether I'm in a board setting, or whether I'm in a study group, it doesn't really matter. But I did achieve quite a few things, both emotionally, commercially, privately, through the drive which I have. So I think this is the key aspect that defines me. Yeah.
And Michael, I love how you went, what have I achieved emotionally, financially, etc. There's a lot of about self-learning, self-growth that you've achieved as well. Can you share a little bit with us why this is so important to you?
Yeah, I think, the number one skill that you need to develop, and it doesn't matter whether this is in a private context or in a commercial context, is awareness. And it is self-awareness. So you really need to understand who you are, and how you are different from other people, and how you can contribute, but also where the limitations are. And obviously, we all have far more limitations than we have strong points. So you need to be very clear on the very narrow front that you can make a true difference, but also all the things that are not going to happen because you are involved, respectively, because other people are not involved in this. So it's all about awareness. This is, for me, is the number one thing. And everything that has worked out extremely well was because what I bring to the table, and all the things that didn't work out was either because I didn't involve people who were required for the situation, or I just didn't have the awareness that, okay, this needs to be done in a completely different thing. So, as an example, on the board, drive is a key element on this. And I notice this in the board positions which I have at the moment, but it is not the only aspect. So very often it is an emotional journey, especially if you bring in new board members who had not had a board experience before. They are just not as certain on what they need to do. And you need to have a certain awareness, on how people feel, and how they need to be, guided in that specific moment. And that might have nothing to do with drive, but that is just, understanding, listening, and pointing in the right direction on this.
Michael, how does one go about building awareness? What has been your experience around that?
I would say you fail very often. Yeah, is obviously the more drive you have, and the more this is unfiltered. When we are born, we're all like a raw diamond. It's not really polished, so it doesn't look great. But we have certain talents, we have certain way that we think, feel, and act, and think that this is the only and the right way. So you achieve certain things, but others you don't. And the harder you try to force other people to align with your vision or what you have in mind. I've been self-employed since the age of 24, so this was an early on move that I thought, okay, I'll just persuade people hard enough to walk in the direction that I want to do. But if that doesn't work, then you need to reflect. So it is similar like in sales, the only true measure is, did you realize a sale? And if not, you were wrong and something was wrong and you didn't have the right awareness or whatever the challenge was at that point in time. So I think you learn through failure, and the quicker you fail, the better it is. So if you have no job and you have no social skills, then you'll have to learn the hard way. And that was my journey in the beginning. I didn't become self-employed because I was such a unique, brilliant visionary, but I often had a lack of skills, which made it unable for me to work in a large corporate setting, that I said, I'm just not going to deal with that. And I walked away from it. And it took me many, many years then to learn social skills and to develop this awareness and says, okay, yeah, I see where this is going and where the challenge is. And often it's within yourself.
I think the word that stands out for me as you speak, Michael, is the word courage, right? Courage to actually seek to understand yourself in this process, this difficult process that you spoke about. But also your journey seems to be one of courage, all the steps that you've taken along the way. Michael, how has your journey evolved in terms of board positions? Because I know that you hold quite a few board roles at this point. Share with us and share with the listeners as well what your journey around board roles has been, and what are some of your key learnings as you've gone through this?
So I think courage is a fair point just on that, but similar is commitment. And you could argue what comes first. I believe commitment comes first. You need to make a commitment. So recently I entered into a venture where I'll have to raise a substantial amount of capital. And I said, well, we'll commit that we're going to raise that capital. And I didn't feel very, encouraged at the time because there were a lot of pieces missing on this one. But the commitment was clear because we said it needs to happen. Somebody needs to make it happen. We need to make it happen. So this was the first point. And then obviously, if you have courage, sometimes there is a loop, there is a cycle that feeds back into making this commitment because of the courage you have. But in terms of the board roles, I had board positions over the last, I think, 15, 20 years. And many of them within financial institutions. That is a background which I have. And these are regulated corporates. They have to, whether they are listed or unlisted, they have to follow compliance reportings, risk reportings, a lot of transparency that needs to be provided. You are liable for your actions in an additional way than in a standard corporate setting. So my awareness on being compliant, doing things in a certain way, I think has grown from a very early stage on. A lot of the board positions which I've gained over the years were within financial institutions, but within different sectors. So I have covered more or less all aspects of financial services, and also across multiple jurisdictions. I've worked in at least 8 different jurisdictions with board positions, from Hong Kong to Mauritius, to the UK, to Luxembourg, to the United States. And that, I think, that is a finite journey. At some point you've been everywhere and you've seen everything and you say, okay, I know how the regulatory world works, and I know how boards, are held responsible for the actions. And very often these are, areas where you're not passionate about, but, it's just somebody needs to look after that. It's just a must.
So, Michael, you've done, as you said, gone across various industries and various different sectors as well. Can you share with us what do you find as commonalities amongst these sectors, and what do you think is unique? And as a follow-on from that as well, is how do you utilize these unique or common factors to start to set up boards? Because I know you've shared with me this is now what you are doing for some of the new businesses you're acquiring.
Yeah. So ultimately, there was a time, when I started working, and I thought, oh wow, a tax advisor is a completely different business to a legal advisor or to a business consultant. Nowadays, I think if you take the product out of a business, 90% of the rest is the same. Yeah, and that is a key learning I gained many years ago. So I'm not too concerned about the industry. Every industry has its own macro and microeconomic drivers, has its industry challenges. But we're living in a very transparent world nowadays, so it's rather easy to find your way into understanding, okay, what is this industry about? So right now, for example, I do invest in the RV industry in the United States. So this is the recreational vehicle industry on this. And even though I have not worked in such a firm, but if you see ultimately how money flows through a company and the lines that of work that are involved, the work streams that are involved in this, you understand already, okay, each of these areas, whether it's operations, whether it's support, or whether it's strategic aspects, have similar challenges. I would rather qualify companies not by industry, but rather by size, and say companies which have less than 50 staff have a lot of similarities, whatever the industry is. If you have companies which are above 250 staff, they have completely different needs and operational challenges than, again, those between 100 and 200. So this is how I classify companies. I have more experience with the companies with less than 250 staff on this. And as such, I know the challenges that you have growing to 50 staff, growing to 100 staff. From 100 staff on, the complexity increases tremendously on this. You reach efficiency in companies from 50 staff on. You reach another level of complexity from 100 staff on, from 250 staff. Again, it's another journey on this, and this is how I categorize companies. So the industry per se isn't really the true challenge. Personally, I believe anyhow it is the people behind it. If you have a good team, and this applies as much for the executive team as for the board level, you can tackle any challenge. Yeah. So you need to have multiple brain powers. This is the key thing. So when we talk about assembling boards, for example, you have small boards sometimes, which in a lot of private companies where I have been and am a board member, we have 3 board members. Yeah. And that does what it needs to be, because in order to have an effective team, you need to have at least 3 people who look at the same things. Yeah. So 3 is the minimum size. Otherwise, you don't have a team. Yeah. Having said that, if you want to have and be able to create consistent momentum, you need to have teams from 7, 8 people on. So boards in that size then are able actually to create consistent momentum. And that doesn't always mean that you have full-time people. All depends what boards you need anyhow. Do you need an advisory board? Do you need a governance board? Are you a public company? Are you a private company? Are you listed? In which jurisdiction are you, and where are your clients on this? So all of these things have an impact on how you assemble a board nowadays. Yeah.
Michael, the insight you shared that 90% of the stuff that you're looking at is common, right? Take the business, the industry out of it. The actual pipes that run through a company are more or less the same. I love your categorization on size of the organization that presents its own and unique challenges as well. So with that in mind now, I'm going to just transition us a bit, Michael, to just thinking about aspiring board members, right, who have very strong knowledge and experience in a specific industry. How should they think about positions that may exist outside of their specific industries and experiences, given your point about 90% of the stuff is more or less common?
So personally, I believe the biggest driver for taking a position should be the passion about what the company is doing. This is very key to me. There's 2 companies at the moment where I am not a board member, but if they would ask me, I would step on tomorrow on. They're both within the aviation space. One is a manufacturer from the United Kingdom with a revolutionary helicopter. The other one is from Los Angeles with a revolutionary plane concept. And I just think that this is the future and what humanity needs on this. Once you have that core interest, you're anyhow going to be able to bring things to the exact point that the company needs, because you say, well, ultimately you want the company to thrive. Yeah, I think this is the key thing. So whatever your industry background is, take this as one of the elements. We have 12 core disciplines in any business. Yeah, we have support functions, multiple support functions, legal, IT, admin. We have certain operational functions. Everybody has marketing and sales in it. And we have the same range of topics throughout the board. Everybody needs to know about cybersecurity. Everybody needs to have an understanding of ESG. Everybody needs to have an understanding about corporate finance, in one or the other way. So wherever you are coming from, if you have that passion, and that gives you also the the justification and the right to engage. I think this is the key thing. And I always refer to Malcolm X, which was a black leader in, I think it was the 60s, in the United States, who was at once asked, what competence he has to talk about a certain subject. And he said, the competence I have is my interest to drive this forward with humanity. And this is exactly the reason that also persuaded in that situation. But where I felt, if you have that ambition, if you have this intent, so your intent is the key driver here, then it will work, and then you'll have a chance for a board seat as well. 50% of the people I hire nowadays, whether it's a board or whether it's any other position, is because of the attitude they bring to the table. Yeah. What you need to have nowadays, and whether this is a board position or any other position, is you need to have functional skills. That's 25%. Yeah. But that's what a lot of junior board members actually take far too important. They think they have 100% functional skills because they've worked in a functional capacity. But it just doesn't count more than 25%. 25% is social skills. Yeah. Another 25% is then IT and data literacy. Yeah. And whether this is financial data or this is big data or whatever it is, we have now a lot of help with the support of AI to get and work through data. But IT and data literacy is a key point, and that often starts with how to use all the productivity apps that we have on a computer. Yeah. And then the last point is 25% is just business acumen. Yeah. And business acumen is about, okay, what works, what doesn't work. Keep in mind that a board still has the main role to increase the value for shareholders. Yeah. And as such, you need to have a business acumen to understand, okay, how does the real world look like? Yeah. What is the structure of companies? If you see that more than 96% of all companies worldwide are less than 10 staff, yeah, then this is an enormous part of the reality. And when you think about where you do to advise the management of a company or the shareholders on which direction a company needs to know, you always need to have the end customer in mind and says, how many do we have, to actually address those needs? For whom is it relevant? So I think this is a key point.
Michael, I think that is really, really insightful, like how you've broken it down. 25% functional skills, and the rest 75 business acumen, IT and data literacy, and then looking through at your social skills. How do you actually interact with people? I think that's really insightful for young aspiring board members, because I think you make the point so clearly how we anchor so much in what our functional skill is, that we fail to sometimes realize we are bigger than that. We are bigger than just the functional skill. And I think that's probably a key point for people who are assessing whether they are capable to be on a board. I recall very clearly being shared this insight. When we are young, we are told no job is too small for us. So we roll up our sleeves and we do everything we can, right? At the same time, we are not told, though, that no job may be too big for us. So even though I may not know the market, but I have a whole lot of other skills that I can apply to a market as well. So I think your breakdown is really, really helpful. And I think aspiring board members would be able to lean into that a lot more. And also think about, what do I need to have that makes me valuable to a board beside my functional experience? So Michael, you've recently, well, not recently, but you've been part of the Veblen community now for almost a year or so, Michael?
A year, yeah.
Right. Michael, share with us your experience, and starting with, why did you join the Veblen community, and what has your experience been like over the last year?
So ultimately, I joined the community, and this is not the first community that I'm part of. There's many other organizations, whether it's for entrepreneurs, whether it's for board members, or whatever nature they are, that you can be part of nowadays. To me, the networking amongst the members is always the key aspect. Whoever offers you education or training or a pathway to success, this is just a guideline. Yeah, you have to put in more than 50% of the effort yourself. Nobody is going to do it for you. Webland doesn't appoint you for board directorships. They just offer you different pathways, but ultimately you'll need to build a community around you, and that doesn't have to be hundreds of people. Just pick the key people that align with you, either in the way you work or with the shared interests that you have, that you would say, okay, this is a way that I can be efficient and I can be transparent, open, I can be vulnerable as well. I think this is a very, very key point. One of the requirements of a board member is to speak up in a very early stage before things go south. This to me is one of the key skills which I see. Coming back on the functional skills, is what hinders board development is very often the flogging certain areas of the board or certain subcommittees because you're passionate about it and you want to lead that area. Yeah. So for me, for example, if I hold a chairman position anyhow, I'm not in any leading position in any of the subcommittees, and I'm just there to support and to fill gaps wherever is needed because someone is not attending the board call or there's more workload that needs to be done on this. But I personally have no agenda for any board. There is an agenda for a board, but I don't have an agenda. Yeah, and I think this is also a very, very important point. But we need to be interested and passionate. I would say let's focus on what the company needs. So you need to have a certain level of agility to say, okay, I know what I'm interested in. Let's just look at the company. Let's look at the shareholders. Let's look at the employees and any other stakeholders we have and say what's not there at the moment. Yeah. So on the Webland program, we obviously have a Webland board. I'm the chairman this period at the moment. This is the first time we assemble a board for the Webland program. And because I'm a member equal and a board member of it, I see it obviously from both angles. So there is a lot of learning, and we've identified areas and where we formed subcommittees for, where we said this is of really important nature because of the conversations that the members have and the requests that are shared with us. Yeah. So I joined the Webland community because I wanted to be part of a community that is not 20,000 large, even though Webland might end up at that point. But I say I don't need to have a network of 20,000 people. Yeah, within a board sequence, you have to do your own work, but you still, if you have a network of anywhere 12 to 30 people who are knowledgeable about topics, that's all you need. Yeah, everything else you can build at any given time. So having a closer work group of people that, and I don't want to use the word accountability group, but go-to people. I think this is a key aspect, and obviously Webland is offering this and was offering this, and it's a very international platform as well. I think this is the key point. I interviewed a board member in New York this week who is not part of Webland, but for a board that I assemble in the United States, and I said a third of the board seats are not going to go to the United States in this context here, so you need to have an international network, for that.
So, Michael, you've had lots of experience with boards, right? And now you're bringing that to the Webland community as well, really uplifting the community with your experience. Given your experience, what are the top 2 or 3 qualities that you think a board member should have?
Yeah, first thing is self-awareness, as I said in the beginning. Yeah. And this is truly to see, okay, what dynamic do we have? I mean, as in the role that I have at the moment in the chairman, so I have 2 other chairman positions on this. Anyhow, I'm much more the observer. I'm the one who's giving people the opportunity to speak up. So there's always the extroverts, there are the introverts as well. The introverts usually don't speak first, but I need to make sure that they get the time to speak, and they do speak on this because they have just similar perceptions, different perceptions and qualities on this. But everybody needs to have self-awareness actually on what's going on. And that is, has multiple contexts. This is what's going on the board, but then obviously what's going on in the company, what's going on outside the company on the client side or in the rest of the world on this. So an awareness level needs to be heightened, and I think this is, the ultimate. The ultimate asset everybody has. It's your attention. What do you pay attention to? What do you pay attention to is driven by your self-awareness. What are you aware of? Everybody is shouting, to you through phone, social media, etc., all day long, and you'll have to decide, okay, where do I put my attention? And that is all driven by what your awareness is on, okay, what is the priority on this? So I think this is the key thing. In terms of any other qualities, because you asked for 3, I would say agility, as I mentioned that earlier. So awareness is one thing, then being willing to go into that direction, because we often see things that says, oh, there's something happening on this side. Let me just look in the other direction. Yeah, we all have that. I have that as well. But you're not responsible for the way you are, but you're responsible, especially on a board level, to fill the gaps. Yeah. So again, also the administration of the board seats, which I have, is not just in my hands, but within a team of 2 more people, which are part of my team, to help me just fill the gaps that I do have. Yeah. And for example, one of the things is very often the topic of emotional sensitivity, where sometimes I just don't sense what is going on with someone. Somebody sends a message, and sometimes I don't read between the lines and says, okay, what else is in this message in here? So I need help with that. Yeah. So a lot of the emails that I receive are cross-read by one of my team members, and they are actively encouraged and say, am I missing a point here? Yeah. So this is again a team effort, and whether you have your own team on this or you're part of a board, let's just assume you don't have your own team on this. Again, you need to understand the strong points. With whom can you talk about what and who can contribute, and that's not a question of what positions we have on a board. So very much it's a team effort. Again, you need to have 3 people who look at the same things to have an effective team, and you need to have 6, 7, rather 8 people to create momentum in each and any direction that the board actually needs on this.
I love that, Michael.
So I've only given you 2 qualities, okay?
No, but
really self-awareness and attention, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. This that awareness, that attention, that agility to move between things as well, comes right back to what you shared with us, that 25% is just functional, and the rest of the 75% goes beyond your functional experience and your knowledge as well.
Yeah. When you come from sorry to interrupt you, when you come from a functional perspective, you are also usually used to do things. And it's one of the key challenges as a board member, where you say, well, try to find the leverage, don't be the leverage yourself. Yeah. Because ultimately, this is not an executive level. Yeah. And depending on how big the executive team is, but also depending on how big the company is, you will have to, modify this approach a little bit. Generally, in smaller companies, this is not a governance board. This is often, sometimes a mix of an executive board with a governance board, or it's an advisory board on. But the smaller the company, the more it is often prudent, to roll up the sleeves and say, okay, let me just get this quickly done, because otherwise we're just not going to move forward on this one. But ideally, identify the leverage, be able to explain the leverage to someone else, so somebody else can apply the leverage, but don't be the leverage yourself.
And that is, I think, such incredible advice, right? Because as you said, if you're used to being a functional leader, you're used to being the one who's actually doing the work. So how do you have, and I think it sort of aligns itself to what you had said about your awareness level as well, right? Being aware of a situation, understanding when you've got to step in, understanding when it is not your role to step in as well is really, really key. So Michael, we've had such a rich conversation over the last almost 25 odd minutes. It's been fantastic to hear from you. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, Michael, before we close. First one is, what do you wish you had known before you embarked on board positions or board service? Is there something that you think, I wish I'd known that?
Actually, no.
Tell me about it.
No, there's nothing, because I joined on private boards, and I run my own charity, so I'm not assisting on any charity boards. I just have my own charity on this. But on private boards, we always worked in very small teams. Yeah,
Right.
so a lot of small financial services company have 3 board members, and you learn on the go. You usually come on these boards because of a certain functional skill or a certain involvement in the business. So you're not necessarily a non-executive; you are an executive in the business. So this gives you a lot of room to learn. Yeah. So for that reason, I say there isn't really anything that I wish I would have known earlier. I wish if we would have had ChatGPT 20 years earlier, but that's not the case. Yeah.
But it's here now, so we get to enjoy and explore at this point. Oh, I love that, and I think also what I'm learning from you about you, Michael, is no regrets for things that you didn't know, but only opportunity to learn things in the future, right? Today and in the futures, and I'm learning that about you. So, Michael, any advice for our listeners who are aspiring board members? Any thoughts that jump to mind and you would say, you want them to remember this?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we discuss is, just be less concerned about the functional skills you have. If you have worked more than 10,000 hours in whatever capacity it is, you are an expert. Yeah. So depending on how many hours you put into what you do, it's either 5, 6, or 7 years, and you have these number of hours. So a lot of us have 20 years experience, 30 years experience, but that often means, a lot of repetition on this, even though more and deeper insights on that, but it's just not more than 25% of what is required on this. Mm-hmm. I had a call recently with a company that is raising capital and is intending to raise capital from Chinese investors. And I said, if you don't have a single board member that is Chinese, said that's just not going to go down well with certain family offices from China, because they don't see their interests being defended. So this is something that you should take into consideration when you look for board positions, as where I am actually, bringing in diversity just because of who I am and where I come from. Yeah. So look at these things. These are relevant for boards. I think this is a key advice, and it's not necessarily at your doorstep. It is somewhere else. I spend a lot of time in Africa at the moment. Obviously, this is exotic, or I am exotic to the African market because there's not so many white people where I go. So that's already a differentiator. And if they want to go global, it says you need to have a global board.
Right.
Yeah. So functional skills are less relevant. Look at diversity and how you bring diversity into the topic. And the last thing is, you need to be passionate about this. You need to be really wanting this company to succeed within the shortest period of time. And I think this is a key point, the shortest period of time.
Absolutely. And I'm going to wrap us up, Michael, coming back to those 3, right? Functional skills, important, but less important over time. Diversity, look for their diversity. And as you shared, be passionate about the area that you're going into. Michael, it has been such a pleasure to have you on Candid Coffee today. I certainly have learned a lot. I mean, the stats that you've thrown out, that was unique and eye-opening to me when you said 96% of companies have less than 10 employees. And I thought, okay, I did not know that. But Michael, you have shared so many nuggets of wisdom and knowledge. And I think that aspiring board members, just hearing you and realizing I have a certain level of functional skills, but that does not mean I cannot enter diverse industries and bring diversity of my experience here. It does not mean that I have to have full knowledge of a certain market before I enter it. And I love your point around self-awareness, right? How do we grow our self-awareness as well? Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear from you, explore your experience with you, but also take so much wisdom from you. And I'll come back to those 3 words that describe you: knowledge, innovation, and drive. And if anything, I think this podcast has clearly highlighted your depth of knowledge, how much we can learn from you, the innovative approach you've taken to your own career, but also that you bring to diverse industries as well. And the most important thing is you can hear your drive. And Michael, I want some of that as well. I'm going to take some of that. I've also, you spoke about your time in Africa, and that also leads me to the diversity of your global experience: Africa, the US, Europe, and speaking to the Asian markets as well. I mean, that's fantastic to hear. And of course, now you said you're investing in RVs. That's very exciting for me because I want to do a road trip across the US. I'm
Yeah, for sure.
with an RV. I'll be your test case, Michael, right? Over
Definitely.
time.
New models, new models need to be tested, so somebody needs to drive them. I will think about
Somebody
you.
has to do that hard work, Michael, and I'll take
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
To do that hard work. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, thank you for joining us today on Candid Coffee with Michael. We look forward to you joining us on further Candid Coffees. Watch the space. There's going to be further exciting interviews coming on as well. And if I think about the standard Michael has set today, I'm looking forward to all of the further discussions we are going to have. So, Michael, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for the call.